You're listening to Scary Sleep Stories presents The Dark Hours.
Welcome, guys. I know a lot of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before you drift off like the video, subscribe if you're new, and comment what time it is right now. Let's see who's still awake and who's not alone tonight. Let's begin. Story 1. The Echo of Hollow Lake. For years, Hollow Lake had been just a name on old maps and a whisper in local folklore. Nestled deep within old pine woods, its dark, still waters reflected not only the canopy above, but secrets lurking beneath. Alex, a documentary filmmaker specializing in abandoned places and forgotten stories, had long been drawn by the legends. Locals recited them with caution, but always with a sense of inevitability. If you stayed long enough or listened hard enough, you'd hear the echoes too. Arriving at the ramshackle cabin that would be his base camp, Alex felt the immediate weight of silence press down. Even the birds avoided Hollow Lake shore. The last shopkeeper on the way in warned, "People don't come back right from out there." Alex, accustomed to campfires in empty buildings and sleeping beside forgotten highways, felt only the thrill of the unknown. He carried with him the tools of his trade: 3 cameras, sound equipment, solar chargers, and a thick notebook, his lifeline of order. His plan: spend 7 days alone on the shore, capturing ambient sounds, interviewing those willing, and perhaps finally uncovering the truth behind the lake's reputation. He set up in early autumn, days shortening, with fog rising like breath at dawn and geese flying south by dusk. The first 3 days passed in routine observation. He filmed ducks skimming the lake's glassy surface, documented the sunken dock half swallowed by reeds, and kept careful notes on the strange pattern of wind, how it always seemed to blow away from the water, never toward. Night settled cold and heavy. At dusk on the 3rd day, as Alex logged his recordings, silence deepened until every creak was amplified. That's when it started. From somewhere in the forest, a clear, mournful female voice called a name: Elliot. Alex froze. His handheld recorder captured the cry, sharp, sorrowful, stretching across the lake. There was no one visible along the shore. When he played back the tape, the name was there, woven between owl calls. Elliot. He shuddered, unsure if it was local pranksters or the lake itself playing tricks. Curiosity became obsession. By lamplight in the cabin, Alex combed through county records and library files. He pieced together the story. Elliot Nims was a boy who vanished near Hollow Lake 50 years ago. Unsolved mystery. Family torn apart by grief and suspicion, a suicide note that may not have been written by Elliot himself. Some claimed he drowned. Others swore the water itself pulled him under. On the 5th night, things began to unravel. Alex's equipment, malfunctioned microphones buzzed with thick static camera batteries drained without warning, and lights flickered as if on the fritz. Shadows among the trees grew impossibly deep, like holes punched into the fabric of the world. Half dreaming, Alex caught glimpses of a figure tall, just beyond the reach of his flashlight, face blurred by swirling mist. When he tried to film, the lens fogged, the image dissolving entirely. He lost hours to uneasy sleep, punctuated by nightmares of tumbling through endless water. Beneath the lake's black surface, faces spun past their eyes wide with accusation, mouths moving in silent warning. In the morning, everything seemed normal again, until he found a child's shoe, half rotted, wedged between 2 roots, unmistakably old. He pressed on. He convinced a local, a retired fisherman, to tell what he knew. "There's old bones down there, sure. Every family has lost someone. We don't talk about it. The lake needs silence." On the 6th night, the echoes arrived in earnest, a polyphonic choir of voices, layering on top of one another in a discordant, endless song. Laughter of children, a woman's cry, a man's frantic apologies, all shifting and swirling. Alex followed the voices toward a ruined boathouse, its roof caved in, dock posts jutting from the water like snapped ribs. Inside the boathouse, shadows bundled thicker. He stumbled across a rotting leather diary. Its pages, soaked and decayed, told the story not in coherent sentences, but scattered fragments. "Don't trust the girl. The water called me. She waits, and I stay." The final entry was a scrawled plea: "Don't forget me." That night, water lapped hard, and cold hands seemed to reach up from the shore. Alex's own name floated from the air, repeated in dozens of overlapping voices, each eerily familiar, each tinged with desperate longing. He raced to his cabin, water already seeped in an impossible flood rising from the pine boards. He tried to call for help, but the cell tower was out of range, his GPS a tangle of nonsense lines looping him in endless circles. In those final moments, climbing the embankment, Alex looked back at the lake and saw 1,000 faces hollow-eyed, their mouths shaping silent goodbyes. The air shimmered with their presence, and he stumbled, unable to look away as the voices crescendoed and then all at once cut to silence. Alex disappeared before dawn. When the townspeople found the cabin days later, they found his camera's battery dead, cards wiped clean. In his notebook, the last entry was a shaky script. The water keeps what memory forgets. No footprints led away from the site. Boats sent onto the lake for search and rescue drifted back with no one aboard. Lines snapped and lures frayed. The record might have ended there, but it didn't. The weeks following Alex's disappearance marked an unsettling hush that blanketed the village. Fishermen refused to cast nets into the waters, claiming something tugged at the lines, pulling harder than any current. The library, once their beacon, closed its heavy doors for weeks. Unease thickened in the fog. It was then Sarah Delgado arrived, a young folklorist from the State University. She had read Alex's articles online. Now, she felt the echoing pull of Hollow Lake herself. She planned to catalog the stories, never believing the rumors except as interesting artifacts. The innkeeper's only warning: people in this town don't need reminding. Still, Sarah was stubborn, recording by day, pacing the shore by night. Each dusk, she too heard whispers, intertwined laughter, and weeping that had no visible source. More and more, the lake captured her thoughts, wrapping them tight in its damp embrace. She found herself collecting artifacts from the shore. A notebook page, a locket containing 2 blurry photographs, the same boy, Elliot, and a girl Sarah could not identify, frozen in grainy black and white. The echoes found their way into her own recorder. Reviewing audio one evening, Sarah heard not only herself, but a dozen voices, layered and out of order. Clearest was one phrase, repeated with each playback: "Help me." It was Alex's voice. Sarah became consumed. Her dreams slipped into watery graves, faces pressed against her eyelids, cold as stone, children chanting beneath the surface, boats drifting endlessly across still water. She pieced together fragments in her increasingly frantic journals. Curse isn't a curse. It's a memory we refuse to keep. She learned of the local ritual each year. On the anniversary of Elliot's disappearance, villagers left offerings at the water's edge. A tenuous truce, the memory of loss paid again, to keep the lake satisfied for another turn around the sun. One evening, as heavy fog rolled across the water, Sarah stood by the bank, journal in hand, as if waiting for a reply. That was when she saw it. A shadow, arm outstretched, palm up in silent greeting. The world went cold. Her breath hung crystallized in air. The woman standing on the water was not quite living pale, eyes hollow. She opened her mouth, and the chorus began anew. "Remember us. Remember Elliot. Remember the price." Sarah staggered back, understanding what Alex had faced. The lake never forgets. It collects and collects, drawing all who lingered too long into its song. Dawn finally burned through the mist, and Sarah found herself on the far side of the lake. Shoes soaked, journal clutched tight. She left town that morning, determined to write, to try to free the voices, to remember for them. She never returned. But sometimes, in dreams or in the white noise of a radio, she hears the song, the infinite, restless echoes of Hollow Lake. And so the chorus persists, year after year, seeking anyone brave enough to listen, to remember, and perhaps, at last, set what's trapped beneath the surface free. Story 2. The Labyrinth of Aramore. Prologue. Lakevale was a town that tried to forget its own history. It sprawled along the edge of forgotten woods and ringed, in its oldest quarter, the decrepit estate of Aramore Hall. The estate had been empty for decades, its iron gates chained, its grand windows boarded, and its gardens long surrendered to bramble and shadow. Every generation told stories. The townsfolk muttered about the Aramore curse, missing children, flickering lights, midnight voices. Very few believed them, but everyone kept their distance. until someone new arrived who didn't know any better. Chapter 1. Arrival. Ella Faro didn't believe in ghosts, curses, or fate. She was a PhD candidate in architectural history and, after years of study, determined to prove the myths of old estates like Aramore were just that, myths, obscuring the truth behind brilliant lost engineering and stories rewritten by frightened imaginations. She came to Lakevale on a fellowship grant, hoping Aramore's blueprints would reveal the secrets that made the estate infamous. Her first encounter was with Miss Fitch, the town's dour historian. People say Aramore's doors shut themselves, that nothing grows near the East Wing, and that no one who spends the night in the hall comes out unchanged. The old woman told Ella on her first, mourning over cracked mugs of tea. Ella smiled politely, jotting down the more plausible tales, hidden wine cellars, unmarked tunnels from the local rumor mill. She was here for adventure, yes, but one rooted in the thrill of discovery, not superstition. On her third day, she found the deed at the city records, unclaimed and unvisited. There was nobody left to contest her presence. The only restriction, she'd need a key from the city vault and someone with her at all times. For liability, the clerk winked. Or so you don't. Vanish like the rest. Chapter 2. The first door. The hall was bigger than Ella expected. Ivy smothered most windows. Inside was the chilled, layered smell of wet stone, dust, and old paper. She was accompanied by Daniel, a volunteer from a local restoration society recently graduated and equally eager, secretly, hoping for ghosts but content to help document the bones of the place. They set up base in the crumbling main parlor, lighting, lanterns, and starting blueprints. Their first strange encounter happened on the main staircase. As Ella traced the trajectory of carved balusters, a whisper drifted up from below a child's giggle, too close, too real for memory. Daniel froze, then laughed nervously, brushing it off as wind. Ella made a note, but as she did, her lantern dimmed. Despite full batteries, the light shrank to a flicker. Above them, the house cracked a long, low sound like a breath. The lights returned as quickly as they vanished. Daniel shook off his nerves. Ella's curiosity sharpened. Exploring further, they discovered a warren of unfinished rooms. Some bore letters etched into the beams, strange alchemical symbols, and half-faded murals of mythic figures, beast and human. Their greatest find was a locked door in the west wing, securing a passage that did not appear on any blueprint. The door was reinforced and bore a tarnished brass sigil, a labyrinth entwined with an eye. Chapter 3. Descent. They spent hours trying to open the door until Ella's hand, brushing the sigil, seemed to trigger a mechanism within. The door swung inward, warm air spilling out from a spiraling passage chiseled into the bedrock below the estate. Daniel hesitated, but Ella pressed on, notebook in hand, as they descended into shadow. At every bend in the tunnel, the walls glittered with mica and old gold leaf, and murals told stories, cryptic scenes of masked figures bearing lanterns, crossings of rivers, riddles painted in looping verse. All secrets are the cost of courage. Only memory guides the lost. Turn not left, nor stride with hurry. What's forgotten now must stay forgot. At a fork, the left path shimmered with faint light. The right was ink black. Ella, ever the rationalist, chose the right, guided by the blueprints etched in memory, but quickly lost sense of direction as the tunnel corkscrewed downward. Daniel followed, silence binding, them tighter than words. They entered a vast subterranean chamber. Lanterns automatically flared to life, revealing hundreds of manuscripts, objects, and architectural models trapped in glass cases. This was, Ella realized, a secret archive, curated by unseen hands for centuries. Every few feet, faint whispering returned names, dates, half-formed warnings. In the center, sealed within a cube of glass and gold frame, was a rotating puzzle box about the size of a human head dials and sliding plates covered with the same labyrinth symbol. Chapter 4. The Labyrinth Box. They spent hours studying the chamber. Many of the cases held objects clearly out of place for England. A Polynesian charm, a step pyramid scrimshaw, a Viking runestone. Ella felt presences shifting behind the display glass, as if each artifact contained its own memory, reaching out for release. But it was the puzzle box that drew her most. It must be the original owner's legacy, she said. A test or trap for heirs. Daniel, ever more spooked, begged her to leave it alone. But she was entranced, sure the box was the key to the estate's mystery. Engraved on its lid was this phrase: "In this house, all that is lost returns. Nothing ends. All begins anew." She worked the outer dials. Each turn made the lanterns flicker and changed the whispering language in the room. Eventually, she heard her own name, whispered thrice. Not as if called, but as if remembered. The box opened with a click, revealing a silver key and a folded piece of oilskin. The oilskin unwrapped into half a blueprint, not seen in any other archive, detailing yet another, deeper passage below. The ground quivered. Air turned cold. Daniel insisted, "We have to go." But Ella shook free of his grip. Chapter 5. The Heart of the Hall. They followed the new passage, which twisted past layers older than the mansion above cobblestone, then rougher stone, then ancient cut steps. At the bottom, they entered a vault, a circular room lined with mirrors, each laced with looping writing. Stepping inside, Ella was startled by her own reflection, her face fractured into a dozen variations. Older, younger, unfamiliar, even versions with scars she had never known. Each reflection spoke its own short sentence. Turn back, keep going, forget and be safe, remember and face the cost. Daniel panicked, refusing to enter. "It's wrong. This isn't history. It's a warning." He begged her to return, but Ella was mesmerized. She placed the silver key in the only plaster keyhole in the room. All but one mirror shattered with a howl and a great cry of, "Welcome back, Elena." The last reflection was not hers, but a woman's in archaic dress, face frozen in fierce longing. The room flickered. The reflection spoke. "You are my echo. Come when I could not be saved. Remember what I could not forget." Suddenly, memory tumbled over her, as if she were reliving another's life. She saw the construction of Aramore Hall, secret societies, betrayals, and a ritual to preserve the keeper's soul across generations inside the house. There had always been a pharaoh, by blood, fate, drawn to solve the puzzle, the house's consciousness seeking resolution of an ancient wrong. Chapter 6. Choices. For Ella, the boundary between self and memory dissolved. She realized the hall was not haunted, it was sentient, built as a vault for stories and souls. Its history directing the fate of those meant to complete the pattern. To escape, one must accept or rewrite the past. Ella touched the final mirror, demanding, "What do you want?" A chorus answered within her mind, "To be witnessed. Set our memory free, or be our keeper forever." Faces filled the periphery, each a prisoner of some unfinished tale, some resigned, some frantic. Daniel's voice, sharp and panicked, pulled her back from the trance. He insisted they flee. Ella hesitated at the edge, the silver key warm in her hand. She tore the blueprint in half, set it alight with her lantern, and pressed her hand to the stone, vowing to remember and tell the true story. The room trembled, light whirling through the mirrors in a vortex, as the house's history unwound at last. With the echo of 1,000 voices fading, the passage opened behind her, a way out. Epilogue. Days later, back in sunlight, Daniel left for London, warning Ella to do the same. But she remained, compiling her findings for the world, her thesis a testament not only to the architecture, but to the lives, loves, and lost stories preserved by Aramore. The hall's doors no longer shut on their own. Its windows allowed starlight to pierce the gloom once more. At night, the wind carried no more whispers, but if a listener was patient and the hour late, they might still faintly hear a woman's voice in the halls, repeating softly. Remember, Story 3, Whispers in the Wall. Margaret Harrow moved into Crestview Heights looking for a clean slate. The sprawling Victorian mansion was cheap for its size, and the locals seemed all too eager to part with a house heavy with unease. Crestview Heights perched at the edge of a sleepy upstate town, its painted eaves curling like claws, its 100-year-old windows peering gloomily over tangled gardens. The place felt less like shelter, more like a living thing, watching, waiting, listening for the next voice to add to its collection. At first, Margaret told herself that the home's quirks were simply the writhings of old wood, doors that unlatched on their own, cold drafts winding up the grand staircase, soft hisses as steam pressed through ancient pipes. But as days blurred into weeks, Margaret realized some sounds weren't plumbing or winter wind. Late at night, as she lay wide awake in an unfamiliar bed, whispers threaded the darkness, torn sentences, half-remembered names, lullabies too old to recall. Their tone was pleading, anxious, too human to be echoes. Sometimes the voices almost comforted her, a murmur of company in the long, empty nights. On the loneliest evenings, Margaret began to talk back in a whisper, asking questions she never expected, answered. Who are you? What do you want? She half hoped for a reply. What she received were chills crawling up her spine as the darkness seemed to contract around her words. Obsessed, Margaret launched herself into the house's innards, pulling up floorboards, prying at warped panels, shining a flashlight into the crawl space. She mapped every void and discovered relics from lost decades, rusted spoons, shattered china, a brooch the size of a coin. Beneath the grand stair, a loose brick tumbled free, and behind it lay a battered leather diary. The cover bled brown with time. The ghostly script inside revealed a voice not her own, Eliza. The entries traced Eliza's dreams of escape and her fear of the household's matron, whose silent cruelty pervaded every corridor. The diary ended mid-sentence. Eliza vanished before the house entered the city's records. Margaret couldn't let the mystery go. Fueled by half-familiar anxieties, she met the eyes of neighbors as she strolled the street. Most looked away, shifting as if the very conversation might unearth something best left buried. Only Mr. Gardner, who delivered her mail for 40 years, warned with gentle firmness, "Your house is hungry, Miss Harrow. Don't let its history become your tomorrow." Margaret laughed it off, but took, soon enough, to drawing the blinds at sunset and jumping at each creak. As autumn deepened, the whispers grew closer, crawling up Margaret's spine. She'd wake in a cold sweat, convinced someone was standing outside her bedroom door, holding its brass knob with trembling fingers. Her reflection twisted in the cracked bathroom, mirror her face distorting, wavered by ripples. Other faces, the face of a crying girl, a stern woman, a grim bearded man briefly took shape and vanished before she could blink. Sometimes, brushing her hair, she'd hear her own name repeated softly behind the walls in a voice not her own. One evening, Margaret hosted a small dinner for neighbors. It was meant to combat the feeling of isolation. Eleanor and Peter Loomis, an elderly couple next door, shared stories about Crestview's old owners, recalling odd lights seen at midnight and laughter from rooms believed empty years before. Their daughter, Hazel, in her teens, confessed a dare from classmates. Spend an hour in Margaret's cellar. Hazel claimed she'd bailed after 10 minutes, unnerved by the crying in the walls. Battling the urge to flee, Margaret obsessed over the diary's mention of a hidden cellar room behind the woodshed. Peeling back thick vines, hacking away rotten planks, she found an old brick doorway. It took her 2 full days to pry it open. Dust and chill poured out, as if the structure exhaled. A narrow staircase led down, each step groaning beneath her weight. The air turned damp and metallic, and the smell of ancient earth pressed close. The room was smaller than Margaret imagined, packed with darkness that pressed against the beam of her flashlight. Occult symbols covered the walls. The whispers here became urgent voices, cries for help, accusations, desperate confessions. Margaret recoiled as cold skeins of air brushed her skin. Her own name bubbled up from the floorboards beneath her feet. The next days spiraled into timelessness. Margaret's sense of self dimmed. She lost track of hours, sometimes finding herself standing in hallways, lips moving without sound. Her dreams bled into reality. She saw Eliza cowering in corners, the matron stalking the landing, late at night, her face a pale mask of rage. Men in Victorian black, children running from shadows, all seemed to want her to do something. Margaret began recording the voices she heard, leaving a recorder running every night on playback, hidden behind the drone of the house. Dozens of faint voices tangled with Margaret's own sleeping breath. Sometimes a phrase stood out, "The house remembers." She watches from the stair. He never left. One afternoon, exhausted and close to collapse, Margaret played the tape in reverse. The voices resolved into a single, suffocating word: stay. The neighbors noticed her growing paleness, the deepening shadows beneath her eyes, her wandering the street with an absent stare. A mail carrier, young and nervous, asked Mr. Gardner if Margaret was ill. He replied gravely, "Some houses are sicker than those inside." Margaret, meanwhile, received an anonymous letter slipped under her door. "You are not alone. They whisper for you." Her best friend Anna drove up from the city, alarmed after weeks of strange, clipped texts. Anna, a psychologist, was level-headed and practical at least, until she spent a night under Margaret's roof. She too heard the voices. On her second night, Anna glimpsed a ghostly face in the kitchen mirror, an old man in suspenders, tears streaking his face. The experience shook her expertise and forced her to believe Margaret's warnings. Anna began researching Crestview's history, uncovering records of missing persons, secret births, a fire that had gutted the East Wing in 1893. She met George Emerson, the local historian at the library. George was sharp, cautious, and clearly frightened of the house, but agreed to share his findings. He confirmed Eliza's tragic tale, locked away for bearing the owner's illegitimate child, starved until she faded from memory. George added yet another unsettling rumor. The matron, a religious zealot, performed rituals in the cellar to cleanse the household of sin, binding any who died in the house to its timbers and stone. The trio sought answers from Father O'Reilly, a retired priest and folklore scholar. He explained the cellar symbols were archaic, protection sigils, but over generations fed by trauma, loss, and the matron's cruelty, had become inverted, attracting restless entities. Their investigation summoned unpleasant dreams. Anna woke nightly to hearing dozens of names murmured beneath the mattress. George experienced fainting spells whenever he set foot inside the East Wing, and Margaret lost whole stretches of time, awakening in the garden at dawn, skirts wet with dew and mind thick with foreign memories. Determined, the group confronted the darkness. With pages from both Eliza's and the matron's diaries, Anna reconstructed an ancient rite. The friends gathered in the cellar on the longest night of the year, candles guttering, holy water and salt arrayed around the altar. The house fought back voices, rose in pained chorus. Doors slammed shut, glass rattled, and icy wind circled like a snake. At the climax, the group chanted, "From earth to marrow, from marrow to light, release the bound, bring day from night." A blinding glow filled the room as spectral shapes flew up the stairs and dissolved into dawn. The whispers faded to a hush. After the ritual, Crestview Heights was different, lighter. Rooms filled with bird song, corners no longer threatening. Anna and George published their research, warning of the psychic tax historic homes may carry for those who ignore the pain built into their foundations. But some mysteries never fully rest. Months later, Anna, now living in Margaret's old room, heard her friend's gentle voice in her sleep. "Thank you. Don't forget us." Flowers grew beside the old bricked doorway, and the mirror upstairs never clouded again. During long winters, Mr. Gardner still left a single white rose on the stoop, respecting both what was lost and what was saved. Crestview Heights endures, changed and changing, the whispers now gentle reminders, not curses etched into the wood and hearts of those who listen. You've been listening to Scary Sleep Stories. May your dreams be calm and your night undisturbed.